This session, I think this conference is about connectivity and the ideas of SAARC and what the regional organization should do to promote it has been one of the major themes. This session was supposed to discuss can the SAARC work or can the SAARC get it? Can the SAARC get it on connectivity? I mean, that was the broad theme. The Foreign Secretary, Dr. Jaishankar, was supposed to join us, but I think some unexpected work has kept him somewhere else. But we do have Ambassador Shyam Saran, former Foreign Secretary, former Chairman of the National Security Advisory Board. It's a delight to have him here because few people, I think, in our system have done as much work on connectivity, on the region, when he was ambassador to Nepal, when he was ambassador to Myanmar. And as Foreign Secretary too, I mean, I think he traveled the entire India's borders, trying to revive many of the lost connectivity projects. So it's a delight to have you here. Now, yesterday, when the first session, the day before yesterday, when we had the various leaders here on the podium, one theme that came up was this question of the SAARC is the least, South Asia, the subcontinent, is the least integrated region of the world. That this is now a standard, I mean, everyone starts with the premise that SAARC, South Asia, is the least integrated region of the world. But there must be some reason why. I mean, that after all, less than 70 years ago, this was a single space, this was a single market. From Iran to Burma, I mean, the British Raj had expansive trading relations, and its influence spilled across into Tibet, into Xinjiang, into the Indian Ocean. In some senses, undivided India was the center of the economic networks. What happened? Why did we disconnect ourselves from our neighbors after the partition and independence?
Well, I don't think it would be correct to say that it is only India which detached itself from its neighbors. I think the neighbors also saw it in their interests, whatever those interests were or how they defined those interests, that in building up their national identity, in their process of national consolidation, in projecting an independent image of themselves, I think separating or distancing from India became one of the means of doing that. And the reaction in India was really to also then wall ourselves away from our neighbors. You know, a kind of a siege mentality developed amongst the Indian, decision makers. If you see the history of SAARC, since we are talking about SAARC here, when SAARC was established in 1985, although India went along with it, but the general reaction in India was that this is really the ganging up of our smaller neighbors against India, you know, and that this was a means to somehow or the other limit India or to constrain India. And while we sort of pay rhetorical obeisance to that idea, but in reality, we did not want to have anything to do with SAARC beyond, declarations about how we need to collaborate and how do we need to consult one another. But the fact is that for almost the entire history of SAARC, we have not had even one single collaborative project, SAARC-wide collaborative project.
In fact, it's interesting. I mean, I think when SAARC was set up, India was afraid of SAARC, so was Pakistan too, thought it was a plot. And you see the activities that we did in the beginning, it was such powerful things like exchange of audiovisual programs by PTV and Doordarshan, earth-shaking events like maybe a kabaddi match once in a while. But that part of the problem was that both why SAARC did not take off initially and before that why there was this lack of integration was the fact that all of us chose the path of an inward economic orientation. That all of us, everybody was a socialist in South Asia, Indira Gandhi, Bhutto, Bandaranaike, you name them. That you wanted, import substitution, wanted self-reliance. So in a sense, the trade and cross-border economic engagement was de-emphasized to some extent.
Yes, I mean, you are right that there was a certain relative autarky in the way we saw our developmental prospects. I mean, each of the countries in the region. But at the same time, I would like to point out that Politics was far more important than I think the economics were. There was, number one, as I said, a sense of siege, where you started looking at your borders not as connectors, but you started looking at borders as walls behind which you protect yourself. So not only did you make certain that you had very little connectivity, physical connectivity, and even in fact when there was connectivity, until 1965, for example, the movement across the border, say with what is now Bangladesh, it went on as it had gone on before. So even if there was that autarkic kind of economic policy, at least on the ground, there was the old connectivity continued. It is from 65 that really the connections that we had were completely disrupted. So I think this is a mindset issue. Looking at borders as somehow very dangerous places, looking at borders as places where a lot of dangers are lurking all around us. Once you have that kind of outpost mentality with regard to your borders, it is not at all surprising that we have landed up in a situation where, frankly, even when we have physical connectivity, the mindset has not changed. This is something which has to be addressed. So, if connectivity is the theme of this Raisina dialogue, one of the things that I would like to emphasize is, judging from my own experience dealing with issues related to the border and connectivity, it is far easier to put in place, physical infrastructure. It is far easier to put in place, glass-top highways, rail links, as well as, state-of-the-art, these ICPs, checkpoints, international checkpoints, as they are called. But it is far more difficult to really change the kind of mindset that lies behind the actual, how do you manage the actual movement? If you are going to have 5-6 points at which you have to have, have your passport examined, have your custom goods examined, if there are hundreds of permits that still have to be filled up before you can cross the border, that's not much use having physical infrastructure.
So we mastered the art of making life difficult for ourselves in some senses. I mean, what was actually a unified market by conscious choice or by policies?
Well, the only change I would say is that since the time that you mentioned that India adopted a much more open,
so post-91,
post-90, more liberal economic policy, it adopted a more outward-looking economic policy. I think that was the point at which the sense about the region began to change. Two respects. In the beginning, it was still that same sense of siege. There was, in fact, a sense here that, these are pesky neighbors. Is there some way that we can sort of leap over them and link ourselves up with the dynamic Southeast Asia and the Far East? Just let's ignore this region completely because this is too pesky, too difficult. They are snapping at our heels all the time. So why not just forget about them and make that leap to, the miracle economies of Southeast Asia and East Asia? I think very soon, all those who were actually working foreign policy began to realize that there is no such thing as having a credible regional policy, as having a credible regional integration policy, if you are not in a position to really take care of your own neighborhood. If you are not integrated in your neighborhood in South Asia, to think in terms of integration with Southeast Asia, to think in integration with East Asia, very, very difficult. It will always be a suboptimal solution. So this is something which did change. So today, I would say, at least in terms of the policy posture, India is probably a champion of SAARC rather than one of the laggards in SAARC.
No, I agree. I think once, at least today, all the governments, successive governments in Delhi, at least talk the talk of integration, connectivity, free trade, etc. But while one agrees with the logic of regional connectivity, is SAARC really the best instrument for it? I mean, are we wedded to SAARC? Are we wedded to regional integration? Because if we're wedded to regional integration, A lot can be done unilaterally. That is, India can actually unilaterally offer trade concessions to its neighbors. A lot can be done bilaterally, that if you already had historically a free trade agreement with Nepal and Bhutan, so you could build on them. You could do it sub-regionally. In fact, the opening day, both the Foreign Secretary and the Bangladesh Foreign Minister talked about it. You could do it things sub-regionally. So who cares for SAARC? I mean, why do you need SAARC if you can do it unilaterally, bilaterally, and sub-regionally?
For the same reason that you started this session with, that South Asia is a single geopolitical, geoeconomic unit. There is a certain logic to having cooperation, having integration in this entire region. And historically, that has been the case. Culturally, this is a shared space. So even though I'm not saying that we should not have sub-regional cooperation like we have had very successfully under the BBIN, for example, or the free trade agreements that we started off with Sri Lanka, in a sense with several of the countries of South Asia with the exception of Pakistan, actually there is something like a free trade region. But Pakistan is still an outlier. And I believe that whatever may be the difficulties today with Pakistan, we need to be able to chip away at that resistance to regional integration because it is really in the interests of both countries. By the way, there is more trade taking place between India and Pakistan through Dubai and through Singapore than it is taking place directly. If tomorrow you just made that trade part and parcel of the direct bilateral trade, you will suddenly have a very, very, very impressive figure of trade between the two countries. Now, as I said, the Indian posture with regard to SAARC has changed. We are today the champions of integration under SAARC. But if we have to lead the SAARC project, we have to engage in much more active diplomacy in terms of convincing our neighbors that there is a interest, there is a benefit to them in terms of linking themselves up with the Indian economy. This is something which, requires not only rhetoric. We have been talking about connectivity, but I don't think many people here realize that perhaps, connectivity through India is far more difficult than what the connectivity we are asking for through Bangladesh or we are asking through Pakistan. Today, if a container has to go from Dhaka to, say, Islamabad, it has to go down to Chittagong. It has to go all around, the peninsula. It has then to go to Karachi. Then it has to be transshipped and then reach Islamabad. Time taken, 3 weeks. If there was a direct train line from Dhaka to, say, Islamabad, it would take about 5 days. And the costs, are several multiples of what a direct route would give you. So quite apart from the costs or delay, the cost in terms of, the transportation, the much more elaborate sort of transportation links that you have to go through, how does it make any sense? So I think this is something where if the unilateral measures that you're talking about, is there a willingness on the part of India itself to say, I will give you national treatment as far as, the movement of your goods across India or using any port in India that you want. If you make that kind of a gesture, some may use it, some may not use it. But I think that is the sort of, initiative that you need to really change the dynamic that we have been had to deal with for the last several years.
Because what you're talking about is actually having a strategy, because we are the largest country, we are the largest economy. All countries have borders with us, and not many of them have borders with each other. But you saw what happened at the SAARC summit in Kathmandu 2014. There was a motor vehicle agreement that Pakistan did not want to sign it. Then we said, look, we go to BBIN and do 4 of us, that those who want to move ahead, let them move ahead. Now, some people have seen it, look, is this SAARC minus Pakistan? Is it kind of a deliberate thing? Or are we saying that, look, let those who want to go ahead, go, and if Pakistan wants to join, when it feels comfortable, let them join. So in a sense, you're talking about a 2-speed South Asia, much like 2-speed Europe. Some people are in Euro, some people are not, and Britain wants to leave. So there's no harm in having people moving at different paces. But the trick is to keep moving. And I think the question is whether we do through different types of moves, unilateral, bilateral, multilateral. But we must keep the process moving? Isn't that the
Well,
priority?
I have no doubt in my mind that, number one, we should certainly move ahead wherever we can. Very impressive progress has been made, for example, with respect to the BBIN that we have been talking about, whether it is in terms of power transmission lines. We are looking today, for example, at water transportation. We are looking at the possibility maybe that we can take up river basin management. These things were unthinkable even a few years ago. So I don't think we should give up so easily when it comes to Pakistan. I think it is possible to think in terms of having that kind of cooperation also involving Pakistan, because after all, Pakistan is also seeing what is being achieved through the sub-regional cooperation. After all, there is a power shortage in Pakistan. There are areas where it does make sense for Pakistan to source some of the items that it needs from India right across the border, and vice versa for India.
Power trade as well.
So I see no reason why this should not be possible. The more you are able to show that actually this regional cooperation works and brings benefits, as it has to, say, India and Bangladesh. Today, if you ask anybody in Bangladesh or you ask somebody in India, there is no longer that old mindset that if something is of benefit to India, there must be, by definition, it must be a loss to Bangladesh. That is the kind of mindset that you have to need to get out of. And therefore, I think that even though it is difficult, what I would call chipping away, you have to keep chipping away with respect to Pakistan. So the initiative has to be with you, precisely because, as you said, we are the largest country. SAARC project cannot succeed if India does not lead it. That's just the reality.
But there is a fifth option, beyond unilateral, bilateral, sub-regional, regional. There is a different option which you might call trans-regional. That there's no rule which says you can only integrate under SAARC or within SAARC. That actually our ideas on BIMSTEC, for example, was about cutting across the region. Some South Asian countries, some Southeast Asian countries get together. Some of our neighbors like Pakistan is linked to ECO, Central Asia on their own system. So, and now you saw the resonance on the first day here that the Chinese initiatives on connectivity, that there is a lot of excitement, there's a lot of concern, as we heard on the first day, that actually the rise of China and its interest in promoting regional integration, that's begun to envelop South Asia. So therefore, the ways in which some of these initiatives could lead, and I think our Japanese friends now are talking about a partnership for quality infrastructure, they're talking about a big B, not Bachchan, this is Bay of Bengal Industrial Growth Belt, that there are ways in which you could actually link up using the external interest to promote regional integration. And as Foreign Secretary, I'm not blaming you, but you presided over getting the Chinese and the Americans into SAARC as observers. So is that experiment working?
Well, that was because of our Nepali friends, not because of our initiative. Because our Nepali friends were so keen to get the Chinese into SAARC that we had to somehow work out a deal whereby we had not just China, but several other countries as observers instead. So that's a different story. The fact is that, as you mentioned, there are connectivity projects which are being put in place in our neighborhood, in our extended neighborhood as well. It is not my contention that we should keep away from these connectivity projects. But I think you have to be selective about it. Where it suits you, I think there is no reason why you should not join this. But we should also recognize that no project of the kind that China has in mind, which, by the way, nobody has had a role in actually building up that design. I mean, this is a unilateral China project. Here is my project. You are welcome to come in. Our point has also been, why don't you sit down together with us? Let us see how we can build a design which is also to our interest as it is to your interest. That has not happened so far. Maybe it will happen in the future. But if, for example, we are doing work on Chabahar port in Iran, we are building a road from Chabahar into Central Asia to Afghanistan. Now, I can certainly see a possibility and a certain interest for India if that links up with the Eurasian project that China is putting in place. Why not? That's something in our interest. You are aware of what we are trying to do together with the BCIM corridor. I see no reason why the BCIM corridor cannot be of interest to India. So rather than make a kind of a blanket assessment of, oh, why don't we, just join every single connectivity project there is, I think you have to do due diligence and see where are the areas where it benefits India, it is of interest to India, and where there may be perhaps other, considerations which may make us somewhat more cautious.
Now, I think we've also talked about on the maritime side. I mean, I think historically, when the land borders got closed, I mean, our maritime boundaries were always open, but given our inward orientation, we could not do much. But does the Sagarmala project that we're talking about using port-led development, are there any ideas in terms of how you can use your open frontiers in the south to connect? I mean, there are talk about India Southeast Asia corridor using connecting production networks. There's a Chennai-Dawei corridor. There is, through Bangladesh, of course, there's another initiative through Calcutta-Sitwe. Then you have the Chabahar thing you talked about. Are we sufficiently sensitive to the maritime dimension that we actually begin to restore some of the historic maritime connectivities that we've had?
I think there is no doubt in my mind that we are very aware of the importance of the maritime space. We have paid, to my mind, far more attention on the naval side. We have been less, perhaps, mindful of the maritime part.
Civilian.
Maritime is bigger than just naval. So whether it is in terms of having the world-class ports, world-class port handling facilities, having important, shipping lines, shipbuilding facilities, those aspects have to be somehow folded into a maritime strategy, which includes having a very robust naval presence. This is where there is to my mind, there is a certain asymmetry which needs to be addressed. The second aspect is, what do we want to do with respect to the security architecture in, say, what you mentioned, the southern oceans? Now, my understanding is that we have reached out to the island countries like Sri Lanka, the Maldives, Seychelles, and Mauritius to see whether or not we can build a certain kind of security arrangement, with India being a major security provider. And I think that's a good way to go forward. Also, there is a sense that we need to be able to work together with countries like the United States, with Japan, with Australia, with some of the Southeast Asian countries, to really make sure that our eastern flank is secure. Now, here, the general sense was that we are very comfortable here in the Indian Ocean. As far as the Chinese challenge is concerned, if they are preoccupied with the Sea of Japan, if they are preoccupied with the Taiwan Straits, if they are preoccupied with the South China Sea, we have a little space in which we can operate. I think what has been happening over the last couple of years in the South China Sea should make us change the manner in which we are looking at that space. Because in a sense, the South China Sea is the most immediate flank for the Indian Ocean. And what happens in that space is going to be very, very important for India's interests. And how you handle that is something which is going to be very, very important for the foreseeable future.
No, one is the military side, naval side you talked about, but there is also the civilian maritime thing.
Yes.
But nobody's going to help us if we don't develop our own islands. If you see what the Chinese have done with the Hainan Island, how they've transformed the Hainan Island into an economic place, into a major resort, into a naval base. Now, if you look at what we've done to our Andaman and Nicobar Islands and the Lakshadweep and Minicoy on the other side, I remember you gave a lecture many years ago in Port Blair, the mentality of an outpost that had dominated our approach to Andamans. And that we must move from treating Andamans as an outpost to actually a springboard, which is what at least some people are talking about now. Is there a sense that, look, we need now to develop our island territories, create maritime infrastructure, and then they can become actually zones of civilian maritime cooperation in the Indian Ocean, both sides of us?
Well, I can only say that this was something which was promoted rather, enthusiastically at a certain point of time. You mentioned what we were talking about at the Andamans conference. When BIMSTEC was established, we saw that as a kind of a Bay of Bengal economic community, that, the literal states of the Bay of Bengal coming together in a kind of a, that was also an integration of the region. And at that particular point of time, there was a very serious proposal to actually set up the secretariat of BIMSTEC in Port Blair.
Yeah, that would have been brilliant.
And if you look at the map, actually Port Blair is almost equidistant from several of the countries who are members of BIMSTEC. Unfortunately, that was not followed up for various reasons. One was, of course, this, as I said, this outpost, the marine equivalent of the outpost mentality we have with respect to our land borders. But at the same time, there was also a sense that, the kind of development which we would need of these islands would mean a very major change in the ecology of the islands. And when some work was done on what would be the impact on the very fragile ecology of these islands if that kind of major development was envisaged, the end result was that it was decided that it would be too much of an effort on the part of the government to overcome, environmental, arguments and opposition. So it's better not to go ahead with it. Now, I believe that even with ecological integrity, which I believe is very important, you could actually develop something far more substantial than what we have at the moment. But this is a call, the government has to take. Also, the kind of a notion which separates civilian and military in two different boxes, I think that itself is becoming irrelevant. You have to really think in terms of facilities which are both usable for civilian purposes as well as usable for military purposes. Making those kind of very, very fine distinctions, I do not think that they really serve our interest at this point of time. It's the same thing with, say, shipbuilding or building modern ports. They are as important for your naval capabilities as they are for your marine capabilities. So this is something which we have not quite wrapped ourselves around.
One last question, as we bring this to a close, it's the softer side of things. I think for example, the visas. People say getting an Indian visa is tougher than getting an American visa, or it's so difficult to get into India. Then we have the whole set of problems on lack of air connectivity. Yesterday, the Bangladesh foreign minister talked about getting the freedom to carry passengers beyond. At one level, we've actually farmed out our civil aviation market to the Gulf Airlines. And within South Asia, all of South Asians are going to the Gulf on Gulf Airlines, or traveling to the whole world through the Gulf, or through Singapore or Bangkok. But within the region, I think, why is it such a simple thing? As air connectivity, as open skies that we've talked about with the ASEAN, but not with our own neighbors. Visas, again, I think the PM has fought a big battle within the government of India, of course, to liberalize visas towards the Chinese. Here is the second largest economy in the world, and we made it so difficult for the Chinese to do business here. And I think at least this is a new approach, that we see some of it, but we continue to see it's a tough fight. And the other, of course, is the whole question of, the PM has also talked about tourism, doing Buddhist circuit, Ramayana circuit. A whole lot of possibilities where India's, civilizational thing can be connected to a whole set of points in Asia and in our own neighborhood. You see any chance, as someone being in the government,
I'm not in government.
No, was in the government for long years. Can you persuade our security establishment that security and openness, economic openness, need not be contradictory? That in the modern age of data, that it is possible to manage this contradiction, or a presumed contradiction. Is there a way forward on that front?
There's certainly a way forward, and there is, I think it has been proved again and again in many other parts of the world that there are means, modern technological processes that are available to you to actually take care of much of the security concerns that we may have. And those security concerns, by the way, are very real. So I would not say that we should minimize the impact that this has. But to be fair, I think today, with respect to, say, the issue of visas with at least some of the South Asian countries, I think it is far more liberal than it was before. Really, the issue is more with Pakistan rather than with, I think, most of the other South Asian countries. Even with Bangladesh, I think there have been recent measures taken to make the travel between the two countries far more liberal than it has been the case before. But there is a problem with Pakistan. Now, this is where it is when we are talking about, we need to work on our strategy for South Asia. If we have determined that in that strategy for India, it is good for India to actually give greater opportunities for people across Pakistan to actually come to India and see what India is all about, reconnect with their families. Many of them have, family members here. If this is something which we consider good for India, then why don't we take even unilateral measures if necessary? I mean, today, for example, even with the restrictive visa regime that you have, if a Pakistani author wants to release his book, where does he want to come and release his book? Even Kasturi wants to release his book in India, because this is where the market is. If there is a Pakistani band which wants to make a name for itself, where does it want to come and perform? In India.
So we need to change our policy.
I think it's good for India, But if it is good for India, then rather than work on a mechanical sort of insistent on reciprocity, you need to have a much more nuanced policy with regard to reciprocity. Reciprocity will still be very important. I do not think you can do away with that in the relationship that you have with countries. But there are areas where a somewhat more flexible interpretation of reciprocity, where it is in your interest, I see no reason why we cannot do that. Because if we have said, the former Prime Minister of India said, I look forward to a South Asia where it should be possible to, for people, goods, ideas, cultural affinities to, freely move across borders. If that is the vision we have, and if it is also recognized that we have to take the lead, why don't you, even if it is not something which is immediately reciprocated by some of your neighbors, there are areas where you can actually take initiatives yourself.
I won't dare summarize what Ambassador Shamsaran said. I think one thought at least we take away with us, which is borders must be zones of connectivity, not zones of separation. I think the tragedy of the subcontinent for the last 70 years has been we turned borders into zones of contestation, zones of separation. I think the post-91, the economic reforms across the region have at least generated a broad consensus in terms of ideas that we need a more connected subcontinent, rather a more reconnected subcontinent, because subcontinent was connected 70 years ago. So I think getting there, how do we change our borders? How do we transform our borders from points of confrontation, points of denial, points of discrimination, to actually facilitating, restoring the historic, commercial, and connectivities. And that, I believe, is the topic of the next session. How do we get smart borders? And you're going to get a smarter panel than ours, which is going to deal with that. But before that, please join me in thanking Ambassador Shamsaran for a wonderful